we're talking about retention, you'll hear us constantly talk about one number. What's your average monthly dropout rate? Do we know that from those numbers? No, we don't. We can extrapolate, because I can mark this 3-week inactive, I can multiply it 4.2, average 4.2 weeks per month, I can multiply it by 4.2 by that number. But that number is going to vary a lot every week. It's not necessarily indicative. I mean, it's indicative, it's not necessarily the number used, right? Let's take it from a big picture standpoint. Here's what we did with Travis. So we said, Travis, how many, and I'll just make up numbers.
And you guys weren't, well, Matt was, but everybody else wasn't on the call on Thursday. Were you guys on the call on Thursday?
Yeah, so those, we were using real numbers then. But I'm going to make this up, okay? But we say, how many active did you have to start 2017? 278. Okay. When I say active in this context, I'm meaning total monthly active. And you'll hear sometimes we'll talk in terms of current week plus 1 week inactive. So like if we're talking to Keith, that's probably the number he would be using, right? Considering these already dropouts. I usually use the total month number, right? But so let's say that we're talking about in January, how many people came to class last year, okay? What's the next question I want to know? In 2017, how many new students did you enroll? Okay. 150. Okay. What do I know so far? Well, I had this, I've added this. Next question is how many are active today? Right? So, I'm making the number up. We used the real numbers yesterday. Okay? So let's say it's that. Okay? Well, what do I know? I dropped 28. So I'm down 28, even while adding 150. Therefore, I had 178 people drop out. Right? What else do I know?
And those are very typical numbers with schools that aren't keeping track of retention.
These are very typical, right? So, in fact, it may be a little optimistic. Okay? So, calculator. I used to be so good in my head. Now that I have a calculator on my damn phone, it really ruins everything, doesn't it? I have 4 calculators on my phone. I have an HP 10B, a 12C, something else, and the one that's built in.
I've got an abacus.
Abacus? You have an abacus? Okay. Okay. So what we know is on an average month, we lost 14.8 people, which was what we came up with as this number. Okay? We also know that on an average month, we enrolled 12.5. So what that tells us is on an average month, our active count dropped by 2.5 people.
So each month, if you know what your net enrollment is, their net enrollment was a minus 2.8.
Right. Okay.
So they had to get 12.5 just to only lose 2.8.
Well, or said differently, they had to have, at that dropout rate, 15 new members a month to stay even. That's the tread water number. No growth, no decline. Okay?
The schools that grow the fastest, they can do it with 10 or 15 enrollments if they're not losing.
Now, let's take another number, and this isn't necessarily the most accurate, but 248 plus 250, so their average active count during the year was 264. Okay? 264 divided into 14.8, that gives the average month dropout as a percentage. Everybody follow that? 14.8 divided by 264. So in this case, and we came up with a different number, we came up with what, 7.2%, but this is making the numbers up, 5.6%. Okay? So, if I started the year with this number, I added how many new enrollments, I finished the year with this number, right? That gives me what my average new dropouts rate were per month. That gives me my average enrollments per month. That gives me the ability to divide this number into my average active count. So if on average I had 260 people, and on average I lost about 15, that tells me 5-point-something% a month we're dropping out. Does everybody understand that? Okay. Now, you can do that each month, right? So right now I could look at what our December number was. How many active do we have in December? How many people last attended in December haven't been at back since the beginning of the year, right? I can't do it in February yet because they're still trickling into this 2-week, 3-week funnel, right? Because I'm counting a dropout as 4 weeks plus, right? So, but another way to say it would be in February I could look at December, in January I could look at November.
We always run it on the first of the month was always what our goal was.
Yeah, so on the 1st of February you could run December's percentage. On the 1st of December you could run October's percentage. Does that make sense?
So you're backtracking?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But in this case, this is 2017.
A whole year's
Okay,
average.
right, full year, right? But I have to know 3 numbers. I have to know what my active count, head count was, beginning of the year. I have to know my active count, head count in the year. And I have to know how many new enrollments, right? Now again, when I use the word enrollment and dropout, here's where they get screwed up sometimes. These are not ACH accounts that we canceled. These are not ACH accounts that went delinquent. These are human beings that stopped showing up, regardless of payment record, okay? Right? The other thing that gets screwed up is the enrollment one. These are not new accounts created. And keep in mind, an account might be, you know,
3 people.
sister, brother, mom, right? These are head count as well. So I want an enrollment head count. I want a head count of people, not who stopped making their payments or canceled their payments, right? I want to know who didn't attend class.
And that's why everybody has to have an attendance card.
Yeah.
And that way, if you use your attendance cards, you can't get it wrong. Because every new enrollment will have one. Because if they're in an intro, they don't have a card.
Yeah.
Only if they sign up for a program.
And again, you could do this for first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, right? You could do this for January, February, March. The narrower you get it down into a monthly basis, the more it's going to spike in valley, right? So you might have a spike in July, you might have a spike in December, you might have better in April or September. I mean, there's going to be spikes and valleys. So the longer period of time, the more accurate it's going to be. But if you're changing things, then they're not reflected, right? So you've got to balance those two things. But I always want to know what's your average monthly dropout rate as a percentage. But I also want to know what's my replacement number. How many, you know, because in staff will feel this way. Oh wow, we've had a great month, we enrolled 15. Well, you consider that 0. Well, what do you mean? We're losing on average 15 a month, and 15 is our 0 number. You feel great if you did 30. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So you've got to know what essentially your 0 number is. What's our breaking point? And you know, you don't ever break your arm patting yourself in the back for a number that's you know, it's going to keep even or go backwards. Greg, what's your dropout percentage at each school?
We are between 97 and 99 in all 3 schools.
On a monthly,
That's retention.
Retention,
well, on a monthly dropout rate.
2 to 3%.
Okay, so 2 to 3%. I would say it this way: is your target is under 2%. Under 4% pretty good. Anything over 5% is crisis. Industry average is probably 8 to 10%. Okay? Now, and that's not like you guys are just doing transport after school care. You keep that as a separate number, right? Well, one of the good things, by the way, about transport after school care is how does your dropout rate compare with the regular martial arts program? Well, it's super low. Whether the child likes or doesn't like to go in and kick and punch or whatever today doesn't have anything to do with whether mom needs daycare, right? So the dropout rate tends to be super low. It doesn't have to. You don't have to be as on top of entertaining them all the time. You still want them to be happy about being there, but yes, sir.
I currently track my retention ratio by paid accounts. So should I switch over to head?
That doesn't mean you don't track paid accounts,
For sure.
but you track humans attending class even more important.
Yeah, we always track paid accounts too.
Yeah, and I'm going to go through
That's
that.
a separate,
Yeah, I'm going to go through that.
separate,
Yeah.
because you want to have a good collection percentage.
Yeah, and keep in mind is these are enrollments, these are renewals, this is active, right? Now, among these dropouts, there will be people who pay 4 more months before the payment gets canceled or the credit card goes back, okay? Among these active, there will be lost the job, paid in full for 3 years, right? So there will be people who don't have an active billing account either for a good reason, they're paid for another 5 years, or for a bad reason, they lost their job and they're not able to pay you, and you're having to work something out, right? I am emotionally invested in people attending class, knowing that if they're active and engaged and attending class, I can fix financial problems. If somebody who's attending class, if they have a financial gap, they'll do their best to make it up for you in 95% of the cases, right? They'll feel guilty about it. And in fact, when people lose their job or something like that, usually they attend class because they feel guilty they're not paying you. I go out of my way to address that up front. Oh no, well, you come to class. We'll work on that.
So would you say more than half the schools that are just invested in getting the enrollment have a higher dropout rate versus the ones that are invested in actually attending class?
A school with low renewals will have a higher dropout rate.
Yeah, but that wasn't the question. I didn't understand the question.
Say it again?
Essentially, right, like, I like the hunt and like the sell, right? I
Right.
enjoy that and getting the win. And so for me, I constantly have to just check myself and, hey, it's about the student, it's not about the enrollment. Right? Of course, that's what keeps the doors open, but it's about them getting what they're coming for.
Well, the enrollment
Yeah,
is
so-
the student.
For sure.
I mean,
Here's what I think is the most accurate answer. If you don't have a staff populated with people who are hunter warriors who like to make the sale, you got a problem. Because you have to have that constantly. You also have to be populated with empathetic, concerned teachers who are focused on the student and making sure they're there. And the two aren't contradictory pieces of personality, right? Is the same personality that drives you to always want the next enrollment is the same personality that'll drive you to get the renewal, right? Is the same personality that'll piss you off if they're not in class because you know the billing's going to go to hell.
if you
Right.
think of it as the attitude, if you're the hunter warrior, are you going to be after a small game or a bigger game?
Yeah.
Well, an enrollment is worth X amount. The renewal is worth 10 times that X. So every renewal is usually worth 10 times what an enrollment is. So if I had 5 renewals,
Yeah.
it would be the same dollar value to the school as getting 50 enrollments. How hard is it to get 50 enrollments? Tough. But 5 renewals, easy.
And back to that answer a minute ago, the head count of them attending class on a regular basis is the leading indicator of whether the billing account is going to go back, right? So if you're watching the accounts, you're 3 months behind watching the students, right? Because most of the accounts that go bad are because they gave up on the program. and don't care about giving you money.
And they think they're going to come back until about 3 or 4 months. They realize they're not going to come back. Then they decide they're not going to pay anymore. Follow me?
Yeah, not all of them, but
Some.
most of them go bad because they quit on the program. Not they quit on the program because the billing became the issue.
So when you're saying the value of the renewal is 10 times, that's the lifetime value of the customer.
Exactly.
Correct.
Of that 6-year program.
Gotcha.
See, if 72 months and we're charging, anywhere from $300 to $400 a month
Yeah.
for that
Or
72
500 or
months
600 a month.
or whatever it is, but let's just say it's 400.
Yeah.
400 times 72, it's about a $29,000 contract. Well, initial enrollment at $200 a month is going to be about a $25,000 to $3,000 contract. So you got a $2,500 versus a $28,000.
And
10 times the value contract-wise.
well, and there's two other factors. You do a renewal for 4 or 6 years. You do an enrollment for 12 months. Knowing no more information, which is more likely to collect, the 12 payments or the renewal payments? The renewal payments. They're less likely to drop out. They were already an enrolled student, you walked them through a process, they made a real commitment to this long term. So therefore, by virtue of doing the renewal, not only is the face value of the contract better, the probability of them paying is better. The probability of them paying in full is better. The probability of them not dropping out with some little ripple in the external world is better, right? So all of those things get better if they went through the renewal process, they made the commitment, they committed on a long-term basis. Okay?
Did you tell the 3 most important things for retention?
I'm still trying
No,
to.
and I'm not going to right now because we're still on track here. Well, no, that's the whole purpose of what we're doing here. Is if you said the 3 things, is paying attention, right? The 2 most important things for retention is renewal and relationship.
And relationship, part of that is.
Report.
Noticing if they're gone.
Yeah, that makes them feel
Yeah,
appreciated.
yeah. But it's also within 3 foot of the front door. You're greeting them by name. You're
Okay.
talking to them, learning more information. Sometimes it's the simple, stupid rules like the rules of 3s. Touch them 3 times every class. Use their name 3 times
Yeah.
every class.
And it's the 3 things are the stats, keeping stats of it. 2 is the rapport that you're building by making them feel important. And then 3 is renewing them.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so does this make sense? So the staff.
Statistics, then the report, and teaching exciting classes, having fun, getting to know the people, touching them, and then renewal.
The stat for the dropout percentage for any given month is the total number of people who last attended in that month, in other words, they dropped out in that month, divided by the total active. Okay?
That's
But
your
again,
formula.
to know how many people dropped out in that month, right now I couldn't know that. I wouldn't know that for January because what's that?
New total or previous total?
New total.
Well,
It's the total. If you want to know now,
It's-
the most current percentage, it's what your active is now with what your dropout is now. If you had 110 dropped out, you have a 10% dropout.
what?
If you had 100 students and 10 dropped out, you'd have a
Oh,
10% dropout.
As I said,
If you want to
110
kind of want to know
But
the,
if you did it, the new total would be 100 divided by 90 then.
well, then that's still 10%.
Well-
Are you doing retention or dropout? See, it's a 90% retention, a 10% dropout.
Gotcha.
Or do you say it the other way? I have a 10% dropout and a 90% retention. And
Yeah.
if I know what my retention is, I know what my dropout is. So some people always look at it as, I call one the positive, one the negative. Your dropout is your negative and your retention is your positive. So I have a 90% retention.
Well, retention would be like graduation rate. Harvard knows that 90% of people who enroll, or 93%, end up graduating. That's the graduation rate over, in their case, 4 years, right? In our case, we're trying to graduate from one belt to the next at a comparable number. But, okay, so the number that dropped out divided by what the total was. Now, over the longer period of time, the less impact that, how many new enrollments did I do in that month, does that vary, right? Because we know you might have a month where you did 40 enrollments, all of a sudden the active spiked, and the dropout rate looks like it went down, but really nothing happened, right? But if I look at over a year, that sorts out all those little things that are going on, right? If I look at it a quarter, it's still a little bit of impact. If I look at any given month, it can be all over the board. Does that make sense?
And are the new members seeing how much there is to learn? That this is really about becoming a black belt in business? That you really can't learn everything in a week or two. You can't learn it in a few months. It's something that you're going to school on how to run businesses from A to Z.
And that's sounding suspiciously like our after lunch conversation. So,
Just-
back to it
just-
gets measured, it gets done. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Oh, no.
So again, right, like I have a small percentage of students that like will have a job change, they'll have a schedule change.
Sure.
And they're completely not able to make the class.
Right.
Now, I don't cancel the membership. I'm like, hey, I understand, right? Or you can't make it in. Let's.
Are you freezing their program?
No, let's
Well,
schedule.
let's finish the question.
Do something that like what time works for you. So I'm like I'm always like, hey, it's 9:30. What can you come in and we'll train and we'll like I'm just trying to do anything I can to make it work.
Of course, yeah.
They train, they pay their membership, which is great. But again, I feel like the asshole just taking the money. So I
You-
want to make sure they get the service. Or do you guys just cancel the membership?
No, I do everything we can to get them back in class, even hold their time without holding their payments.
Okay, same thing. So make up time.
But
We
wait,
still make their payment, but we freeze the time. We add that on to the end of the program.
yeah, but here's the instructor wants to feel good way to deal with that. I have a box over here, and these are all the people who are sick, have a busy schedule, are in soccer, and they're going to be back, and I don't count them in those numbers. Don't do that.
They're frozen. They're still not there.
They're still going into 1 week inactive, 2 week inactive, 3 week inactive, 1 month. They're a dropout, right? Doesn't mean I'm not, dropouts. I'm
See,
still trying to get them back.
At least
right?
half of them have a reason why they're not there,
Yeah, well, everybody you got hold of has a reason. It doesn't mean it's real.
or they'd be there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And like you say, the staff will do a really good job of, and I recently caught one
Oh,
of
yeah.
our schools had 10 students in that like make them feel good pile. What they were counting them in the 1 and 2 and 3
Yeah.
week, but they were keeping them in the active count number because they're like, oh, they're paying, so they're active. And then,
Yeah. See that, and again, them dropping out is a leading indicator of their billing is going to go back. If you're only paying attention to billing, you're looking at a number that's way too far into the future.
Then you'll never solve it.
Yeah.
If you're on the 1, 2, 3 week, you have a shot of solving it.
Yeah.
So if you could give me like a 5-step program to change that, because I currently track it just by billing, and I do text my students on a weekly basis, checking in, but I don't keep an accurate count of that. To where you're just doing
A side, B side, physical ID cards.
Are y'all doing a class card?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You do an A side, B side.
Non A side, B side.
Where's an A side, B side?
Okay, well that's.
We'll talk
Yeah.
about that today. I'm going to
Yeah.
put that on the afternoon.
Okay.
Can I ask you,
Well, we spent an hour on it last night, so you guys, they laid $1 short.
so
You're here early today.
we call,
That's good. That's good. That's good.
What did he say?
He said we're early today.
That's right, you were.
Yeah. They broke their track record. Yeah.
okay, just a little detailed question, but we get them on the phone, they've not been here for 2 weeks, yes, we want to get you in. What do you do with that makeup class? Do you just schedule them to come at a regular time that you already have, or do you actually do a special class?
I guess the best answer is it
Let me
depends.
answer that because
Yeah.
it happens quite frequently.
Sure.
Number one is, have they been gone so long that they're behind?
Oh, I see. Okay.
If they're behind, then I'm going to have them, when they come in, they'll take their class. Remember, every class has that 15-minute leadership part at the end.
Sure.
We'll keep them during that leadership and have one of my assistants work with them a little extra. If they're in leadership, it doesn't matter. In that 15 minutes, they'll work on a little extra catch-up. You follow me?
Gotcha. Okay.
If they're not in leadership, that means they would be in basic. Then in that 15 minutes that my other leadership people there, my makeup people that have been out for a little bit that I want to get caught back up, I'll have somebody work with them semi-privately or privately.
Yeah, and I would just phrase it a little differently. If the conversation on the phone is, we've been at grandma's and we're back, great, right?
Yeah.
You know, you need 8 lessons this month, you have 4, you're 2 behind, let's schedule extra classes to make up, right?
Okay.
On the other hand, if the conversation is, well, it's really frustrating, we're doing that thing and I just can't seem to get it, I got 2 left feet, now what do I know? I need to put somebody on hand holding because they're feeling like they're getting lost in the crowd or they're feeling like they're a moron, right? And most of your students, by the way, it's not that they think you're a bad teacher, they think that they're a bad student, right? And then they get frustrated and decide that they're just not, you know, built for this, right? Well, I'm just not a natural at blah, blah, you know.
And that's why we
So,
do the
yeah.
progress checks to give them
Yeah.
they have to have 3 progress stripes to do their test.
And as long as we were on a slight tangent, because this is essential for the 1, 2, 3 week inactive count, back to your question on the ID card box, is we're doing it this way. ID card box, and literally is just, in most cases, just a box that we built with 2 sides. It's nothing special, right? In fact, that one looked pretty old and ratty. And so it's got an A side and a B side.
They just use that card index box.
Yeah, the little index cards with
A,
the
B,
B,
C.
C, C. And so we're color coding the cards by rank. And then they have their name and should have what 2 days a week they're coming. If you're putting them in software, you can put the barcode label on the front or back. You know, picture of them would be even better, right? But so you have all the cards in here, and Joe Smith comes in for class first day of the week. He pulls his card out. They line up for class. Everybody gives the instructor a card. If somebody doesn't have a card, they're sent to go fix it, right?
Go get your card. Program director will help them. One of
Yeah,
the assistant instructors
yeah,
will
hey,
help them.
there's one. Yeah, pass it around. So nobody's allowed in class without a card, right? And by the way, you know, ASF and all the billing companies have the fitness center stuff where you have a plastic card and you check into the front. That doesn't do this,
That's not that.
right? That doesn't solve this, okay? So then the instructor collects the cards. What's the instructor going to look at? Are you on track on attendance? Where are you at on curriculum? Is there something else I need to do, right? You're going to organize all those things. Who are my renewal prospects that I need to be working with today? You're going to look at all those things. I always had a box on my desk in the office that all of the cards within 5-10 minutes of class starting had to be in my box on my desk, right? And I always had a prohibition of the cards getting filed before the end of the night, right? So I wanted a stack on my desk, everything's come in, but I also wanted, here's this class, right? So I'm going to look through renewals, who's my dropout concerns, here's my renewal concerns, here's the ones who have been complaining about something, here's my
Who
billing,
needs a progress check?
right, okay.
So
So
you're looking
now, at the end of the night, we file them over here. Okay, so what do I know on Tuesday? Nobody in this side came in on Monday. What do I know on Wednesday? Nobody on this side came in Monday, Tuesday, right? So now on Wednesday, I can go through and call everybody who was supposed to have a class on Monday or Tuesday and get
How
them
do you know
information.
if they had a class scheduled on Monday or Tuesday?
Says on the card sheet.
On the card, you put the 2 days that they are going to be coming.
And if you don't know, call them anyway and say, hey, I know she hadn't been in yet this week, but I didn't have written down, what's your regular class
What are
schedule?
your 2 days?
Yeah, and maybe they say, I normally come in on Monday, Thursday. Oh, well, and so you missed one, we need to make it up. Or they say, I normally come in on Thursday, Saturday. Okay, no problem, I'll have it down, so I don't have to bug you, you know, early in the
You
week.
see why you have to have that on the card?
I was writing, so they come in Monday, they're on the A, they pull the card line out, you take the second day they go to B.
Yeah,
Cool, just double check.
yeah, from then on they're in B side. So
Well,
at the
the
end,
first time they come in during the week, whatever day that is, the first time
Yeah.
they come in, their card will be in box A.
yeah.
The next time they come in that same week, their card will be in box B.
Our staff only refiles in the B side, right?
So Everybody in A, if they don't ever come in, by the end of the week, everything left in A, they never came in. Because
Okay.
as soon as they come in that first time, we take it out of A, we utilize it, we sign it, mark it, whatever we're doing, put it back in B. So now at the end of the week, everybody in B, we know was at least in there one time,
Yeah,
not necessarily two, but at least once.
yeah.
We'll look through them to see if they only came once, we're still gonna schedule them for another class.
Yeah, so now.
Anybody in A, we know wasn't there at
So
all.
now at the end of the week, everybody who's in B goes back to A. Empty file card, dividers are here, right? Anybody who's in A at the end of the week now go into the 1 week box, right? So therefore,
Because they missed the whole week.
and therefore that's this number, right? So I can literally count cards, that's my 1 week inactive number.
A quick question,
Also-
Mr. Oliver. In B, there'll be people in B that only came once. I don't put them in the 1 week dropout because they were there once, but I will call them to get a makeup class. You follow
Right,
me?
absolutely.
Because they only came once. They should have come twice. So next week, I'll want them to come 3 times.
Before you put
And
them back in A, are you gonna go through all of the Bs to make sure they all came twice?
Exactly.
Well,
Before
and-
you
and-
put them back to
Every
A.
single person.
Well, and in practical terms also, when they're in class, you're looking to see if they're on schedule, right? So if they're in class on Saturday, and this is the first time they showed up this week, because you know that, you're dating them,
Go back.
you can have the conversation right then and there. It's better face to face of, hey, I saw you missed your Wednesday class, and if there's any way we can schedule 3 times next week, that'll keep you on track, right?
I don't even say 3. I just say if you can schedule an extra class.
Yeah. But anyway, but see, then what happens is next week cycle happens, right? They go at the end of the week. They come from the B side back to the A side. The ones that are in A have gone to 1 week. The ones that are in 1 week have gone to 2 week. The ones that are in 2 weeks have gone to 3 weeks, right?
If
So
they
now-
didn't come back. If they came back,
They should've-
they go back into A.
Yeah, and now at the beginning of the week, I know there's 25 here, and there's 9 here, and there's 4 here, right? And I know I'm panicked to not let them get to here, and I'm panicked to not let them get to here, and I'm sure as hell stressed out about these guys,
Now,
not getting to here.
here's what'll happen. Everybody in week 1, and you get a hold of them, and they say, "Oh, I'm going to come on Tuesday, my normal time next week. I'll be there." I pull it out of week 1, put a little sticky on it, and put when they're going to come back, that they're 1 week out, and then put it back in A. Because otherwise they're going to come, because they already told me they were going to come, they're going to come and look for their card and can't find it.
Right.
Okay, so,
So I've already put it back in play, but at the end of the week, if they haven't,
Still there.
now I know now they're actually into the second week.
okay, and keep in mind, we're in what's gets measured, gets done, right? So for enrollments, I want to measure where all the leads are coming from, my ratios. For retention, I want to measure current week active, 1 week, 2 week, 3 week inactive. I want monthly, quarterly, annual, what my dropout percentage is on an average month, right? Said Greg's way, what my retention percentage is, right? But I want to know that number, right? Now, the other number I want to know is what are my renewal numbers, right? And it's again, if you were on that Thursday meeting, our second phantom meeting that wasn't supposed to happen.
Which most of them weren't, because
That's,
they were here,
there you go. We're not,
on the way here.
yeah. But one of the numbers we looked at was, okay, last year there were 150 enrollments. How many renewals were there? Well, there were 20. Well, how many renewals should there have been? Well, what we would like to see is white belt, so that's 2 months. Gold belt, that's another 2 months, okay? We would like to see our foundational expectation being 50% of everybody who enrolls renews in that first 2 months. In other words, that white belt, okay? 50% of what's left, which is 25% of enrollments, renew at gold belt. That leaves 25%, preferably less, that haven't renewed yet. Okay? Now, statistically, what we know is most of these never will. Doesn't mean you've given up
At
on them.
best, 5%.
Yeah, doesn't mean you give up on them, but most of them won't. What that also means is, if you screw it up at white belt and only focus on them at gold belt, you're focusing on them when they're harder than it would have been at white belt. And if you screw it up at white and gold and wait till they're a green belt, you're trying to get them renewed at the hardest point, right? And what most people will do when they start getting sloppy is they'll go, oh my goodness, we have a bunch of green, purple belts, whatever, that aren't renewed, and they'll still work on them first. Well, where should you prioritize? The white belts. And then what's your second priority? The gold belts. Then what's your third priority? You know, you work up from there. Does that make sense? Okay. So, and again, I mean, I'll talk to people and they say, well, I do a 12-month renewal and I've got, a 12-month enrollment and I've got a bunch of people coming up for renewal. And my question is always, well, what the hell do you mean coming up for renewal? To me, coming up for renewal is they're a white belt and they're getting ready to test for the gold belt. What most people mean is, well, they're enrolled for 12 months, their 12-month contract is up next month.
What's your chances of renewing them? Slim and none.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you won't.
And
but-
again, that's going to be different from a new member because you never tried it before.
Yeah.
So there could be a whole lot of there, but that's why we call it you're green and growing or you're rotting on the vine.
Yeah.
See, that the most enthusiasm is in the beginning, and then it gets a little plain unless they're doing more advanced stuff like in the leadership. Now they're more excited because they're learning more advanced stuff.
Okay, so now in our measurement, we're going to get into your favorite topic. Okay, so
Which is my favorite.
renewals.
Okay.
It didn't matter what we were talking about last night. It ended up being about renewals. So, which it is, but you know. Okay, so what gets measured gets done.
10 times.
Okay, and I'll use. Is everybody familiar with Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? First things first. His time management system. The way he talks about the time management thing is that there are things that are urgent
And everybody should have a Covey book and read
and
it.
not urgent. Yeah, if you haven't read it, read 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens first, because 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is like the driest damn book in the world. And First Things First is a really good book, but it's basically a full book about the gist of it, which is in one chapter in 7 Habits. But, okay, so you have urgent, not urgent, you have important, and then not important, right? Now, think about in your day-to-day activity. What's urgent? Urgent is every time the phone rings, somebody taps you on the shoulder, they say, do you have a minute? It's every time something puts itself in your face and makes you make a decision on whether to deal with it or not, right? An awful lot of those urgent things are either not important or they're not important to be dealt with at that point in time, right? Now, Mrs. Jones wants to complain to you about the billing and wants to tell you how screwed up they are. Is that important? It's important because you want to have a happy client. Is it important to deal with it while you're en route to do a renewal, en route to do an enrollment? No. So you've got to get my, the script I always taught our staff was, anybody, what do they say? Do you have a minute? My answer is always no. Do you have a minute? Not really right now. What specifically do you need? Now, what does that question accomplish?
Cut to the chase.
I now find out if it's important and urgent, if it's important and urgent for some other later time and place, or if it's urgent and not important for anything that I need to do. And it's
Yeah,
purely
I want to
warm
give
and
you
fuzzy.
that check.
Right, yeah. Well, a true example is, I did I'm running through, tap on the shoulder, do you have a minute? No, but what specifically do you need? Well, our Boy Scout pack had had some entertainment lined up for our big PAC meeting this week. There's gonna be 172 boys, but they bailed out. We were wondering if you might be able to do something.
I have a minute.
Several.
That elevated on to near the top of my list. In this case, I really was in the middle of doing a renewal. So I said, will you do me a favor? Yeah. Come in here, give me about 5 minutes, I'll be back, and we'll figure it out. Okay. So I went and did the renewal, came back and did that. I had another case, I was closing a renewal, $30,000 paid in full, and a 45-year-old parent with some numbnuts instructor was having the father jump over a stack of pads like this, and he landed on his hip and broke his hip, right? Is it important for that to be dealt with? Yeah. Luckily, I had blinds on the office window. So I went out and said, have the paramedics been called? Yes. Are there any bones sticking out? No. Is he awake?
Bleeding?
Yes. Is there a sentient human being out here dealing with it? Oh, yes. Good. You guys let me know when the paramedics arrive, right? And I got my renewal done. So there are things that are urgent and important that are also in conflict with other things that are urgent and important. You got to learn how to, it's like the old show.
And that's why you guys that were at the school last night, you saw the enrollment folder. What were after the goal setting, what were the next 2 pages?
How to deal with.
Remember the parents, they want to talk to you, they're supposed to write it in there, and then we'll deal with it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, but we're still on measurement, right? What gets measured gets done. So the renewal steps are exceedingly important. All the specific language and everything, that's an after lunch conversation. But what you want to keep in mind is this, is psychologically, okay? One, if you're not tracking the numbers, and in your mind constantly it's, well, the last 2 months we've done 42 enrollments. That means we need 32 or more renewals. If you're not thinking about it that way, with that level of focus and urgency, you're letting them die in the vine.
Give them that Colby quick scenario.
Yeah.
One thing on that 2030 thing, there's have you 4 disciplines of execution? I think
Yes.
You recommended that to me.
Yeah.
And it's really short, but what's nice about it is it basically takes the 7 habits, boils it down, and then it also helps you implement with staff. I've used this over the last 2 months, and it was huge for us in our meetings because we have the 3 measurements that you guys are talking about now, but he really defines the difference between lead and lag measures and how to get your staff on board with it. And what's really cool is it helps
What we're talking about there.
the synergy of it. If they're just focused on the retention number, if they're just focused on the renewal number, those are the lag measures. And if you can teach the staff to work on the lead measures, which is the things that can actually influence, it builds teamwork, it helps them get focused on improving that individual result. And so the lag measures improve, but then you're using the definition of all the lead measures. So we implemented that from that recommendation you gave us in the last 2 months. It's been huge.
Everybody write that down? That is really, really useful. Yeah.
Tell them the name again.
4 disciplines of execution.
It's a different thing.
Yeah. Okay.
But
So,
I think it would be important for them to understand the importance of what you just said,
what
because
did I just say?
what you were just talking about.
That one?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Which part?
The part where you said you should have, if you had 42 enrollments, how many,
Oh, okay.
how
Yeah,
many
yeah.
upgrades would you have in
Yeah.
2 months? Well, people talk about they can't charge enough in their area because even Silicon Valley they made too much, they had too many
I had
expenses.
somebody say my students are too smart to pay that much.
Yeah, that's another example. The demographics, there are certain parts of the country that do have lower income, lower population, so the demographics aren't as good.
Mankato, Minnesota.
Anybody heard of Mankato, Minnesota
Dodge
besides
City, Kansas.
Mankato, Minnesota, hour and a half
Sky
outside of Minneapolis, St. Paul, rural farm area, 31,000 average median income, 35,000 population. Colby Winkler does a live event, and Master Oliver, you can go ahead and tell them about it. The marathon.
Yeah, that's one that we've used that number a lot, just because I remember it. In fact, I remember his numbers from that one.
And I like it because of that little small town compared with all of our New York City and all our other big school places and multi-school owners. with 4 schools and 3 schools, and he has one school in that little area. He holds the record for the largest gross for 1 month of a single school, 200,000 cash.
And I don't think that's the record, but that was certainly a record for him.
That was a record I can remember in the last
yeah.
3 years.
Yeah. But
How he did it. Now he's averaging about 80 or 90 is his normal average, which is
the
still
backstory was third week in October, he went to a marathon. He had a booth out there for 6 hours. That's the part that pissed me off. This is all from 6 hours.
And we didn't
Yes.
tell him to do
It
the
was-
marathon. He came up
Yeah.
with that. One of his students approached him, would you sponsor
Yeah,
or
let's-
make a donation to our cancer thing? He said, what is it? He said, it's a marathon. He said, can I set up a booth? Well, we taught him how to do the spin wheel at the movie theater, but nobody had ever done a marathon.
Well, no, we were doing a bunch of fun runs. I mean,
Oh, fun runs.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'd never heard of a marathon.
yeah, well, like a bunch of them, like Fun Run for Cancer and all that kind of stuff, 5K, 10K. Yeah, but anyway, the backstory was third week in October, I believe, is in 6 hours he generated 180 leads, 150 appointments, a tick under 100 intros, I think it was 98, turned into a tick over 50 enrollments. In other words, 54, yeah. 54 enrollments. Now that's the last week in October, right? December, he did 200,000 cash. All of that 200,000 cash from renewals. From renewing those 54 people from October. Now see the time spread, that's why you're pointing it out, is that enrollments in October renewed in December. So enrollments in January renewed by March. Enrollments in February renewed by April. Enrollments in April renewed by May, right? That second month. So usually you're not going to get them in the first 8 lessons. You're going to get them by the 16th lesson before that first test. Which, by the way, is one reason I say you have 6 tests a year. If you have a test in January and then a test in March, then a test in May, you have 100% of the students, even if it's just some intermediate thing you make up, test at that. So you have a big celebration, graduation. You also have a deadline for the renewals. So all those enrollments, you want them renewed before the first test. That's that 50% number. And if they don't, you want them renewed by the second test, which might be the first actual belt. Right? Does that make sense?
Just like Greg now has 30 enrollments the first month in his new school. Well, 2 months, he'll have, out of that, he'll have 20, probably 20 upgrades or 20
So-
renewals.
Yeah, and serious cash flow from that.
I heard Master Smith say that if a parent wants to talk to an instructor, they have to get on a list or something? What was that about?
Ask Adam. He knows. He'll show you.
Okay. We
But-
need that.
We have a form in their enrollment folder. There's a contact paper that is a communication format for a parent if they want to talk to the program director or the instructor. They write it in the book, in their enrollment folder, because we look at that every class. We'll then answer it in the enrollment folder or set up a time to discuss that question that they had. So
There
it kind of
was-
handles the daily interruption constantly, because after every class, 4 or 5 parents are going to walk up to you when you're in the middle of either an enrollment or a renewal and ask you a question, and you don't want to just push them off. Well, they know how to communicate by writing it in the folder, and then you'll answer it or set
If
it
you go
up.
back to the 70s and 80s, there was a great program by Success Motivation Institute, Paul J. Meyer, and it was a time management program. But really one of the key pieces to that program was, in addition to the types of concepts that Covey drilled into better, it was what they call the communication planner. And see, what happens in a lot of business environments is somebody walks in and interrupts you in the middle of something with some, it seems important to them, but some semi-trivial question. In the corporate world, what's happening? They're sending you an email every 5 minutes, expecting an immediate response. Both of those are crazy ways to communicate. The communication planner was you keep it on your desk on a clipboard. Everything you need from that person you take notes of, and then you schedule a time, phone, whatever, to meet with them, and now you cover your 15 points you need rather than pinging at them for every little brain fart, right? What also happens, like a good book is Time Management for Entrepreneurs, Dan Kennedy's book. And one of the things he says, because he won't use email, won't use text, won't use any like modern digital mechanism. But his rationale is, if somebody has to sit down and think about it, make a list of all the things they need from me, and then put it in the mail, put it in FedEx, or put it on a fax machine, half the things they solve for themselves, and I never see. The other half, they've thought through it enough that I can respond to it at one time and not just get pinged back and forth to death, right? So it's an important concept. See, that's what that is instead of I'm in the middle of the renewal and 3 people want to ping me on various things that are important to them, and instead of putting me in a situation of having to kind of like go like that, is it gives me a chance to be, responsive.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So, but again, Master Smith, the other thing you were pointing out is anchor in those numbers is if I do, let's pick a month. In January, I did 20 new enrollments. I would want and expect that by March, 10 of those people are renewed before their bell test. Okay? Or more. If it's more, it's, happy problem.
And remember,
But
you just don't renew them. That whole process for that 2 months is
Right.
part of the
Yeah.
pre-framing and process of getting them ready for that time to renew them.
All those different things.
And
will
then
let 'em-
there's steps to even take them through the renewal process we'll cover also.
After lunch, yes. Okay, so I want half of those enrollments or more to be renewed. And I used to have for our staff is we never charged for test fees, but I compensated them on testing. But my compensation on testing was if they tested for gold belt and they were renewed, they got a lot. If they tested for orange belt and they renewed, they got a lot. If they were testing beyond that, they got a smaller amount of money, but they still got paid. And if they were testing beyond that and they weren't renewed, they got 0. Okay?
Bonus.
Bonus for the
This was bonus. They still got the regular check.
Well, no. This was part of their compensation.
Yeah,
Their compensation was based on percentage of gross and on testing, right? So they got 0 from that person. And the language we used was renewed in cycle or not in cycle. Meaning, and you see how I was communicating with them at every step that we expect white belts to be renewed before they test. It's a crisis if they're not, but at the very least, by the time they're tested for their orange belt, they need to be renewed. Oh my God, you had 10 people who weren't, Yeah, we had an intramural tournament. Some of you guys saw some pictures and stuff I put up. Intramural tournament recently. I'm talking to Amanda and Alan and Kelly and Steve. The thing I'm looking at is, oh my God, you've got orange belts and green belts and white tops. What the hell's your problem? Right? I mean, it'll be 1 or 2 conversations. It'll be, oh great, we have 92 white belts out here, 92 times 20,000, we have $1.8 million in business on the floor. Fantastic.
Yeah, you guys
Right.
that were at Thornton, when you saw the basic class, if you saw anybody in that class that was anything but a white and gold, then they should have been not in that class. If they were green or purple or anything in between, stripes on theirs, only white and gold should have been in that class if they were in leadership. And of course you can tell because they have a blue top, but once you keep them in basic class, they don't get out of basic. Some people say, well, can't you just renew them for another year at the end? No. You're not going to mess with anybody to have to renew them 4 times to get them to a black belt.
Yep.
You
That's
either
our
want to be a
after-lunch
black
conversation.
belt or you don't. You make
Yeah.
your mind.
But the thing about tracking and paying attention is they all know. If I walked into a beginner class and there's a bunch of orange and green belts and purple belts, I'm going to be grumpy. If I look at an intramural and there's a bunch of them, I'm gonna whine, yell, bitch, moan, complain. Back when I owned the school rather than it was a franchise, I jumped up and down and yelled and whacked them in the shins with a screaming stick. Nowadays, I just am more of the are you really gonna leave $1 million sitting on the table out there? I mean, for God's sake. You know, what's going on? that
Because
you're not
remember,
gonna
one
do that?
renewal, 28,000,
Yeah.
one renewal.
Yeah, and that's what I did in my head. I mean, I always, when I walk into the thing, you know, there's...
10's $250,000.
There's 92 white belts out there in white tops times 30,000 apiece. That's the value, right? I mean, I did that. I pulled them over and said, there's $1.8 million out there. I mean, if you only do 75% of them, that's still, what, 1.4? There's 1.4 million out there. You better get to work on it. Don't let them die in the vine, right? I mean, that's the mindset. Now, by the way, back to the hunter killer mindset, make the sale personality. That is not in any way at odds with I'm working on keeping my students having empathy, being concerned with renewals. It is completely congruent. I know that if I don't renew them, they're going to drop out. If I do renew them, they're not going to drop out.
And you have to say in your school, if they get to a black belt in your school, are they better off all the way around, mentally, physically, everything? We know that it's going to give them a big advantage in everything they do. Education, any other physical activities they do, confidence factor, everything. We know the difference it can make in a child and an adult. So that's why if they drop out, if they don't renew, you screwed up.
Yeah.
You didn't convey that message to them enough or develop the rapport enough that they wanted to stay. So that's why your classes, you notice everything we talked about was kind of business. We haven't talked about how you do this technique or that technique. But when it comes to the class, it's the rapport in the class. It's how well you communicate. You know, when you have a meal, if you have a good meal, vegetables, proteins, and everything, and you have a little dessert with it, kind of top it off, well, your class should be that. The main substance of your classroom is the meal, and then the dessert, the last 10 minutes, should be something fun and active that's going to develop.
Here's an incentive. If we finish with Get Measured, we get done, we go to lunch. And we don't go to lunch until we get done with Get Measured, gets done. So
We're not that hungry.
okay, so next point on our Get Measured, Get Done is keeping the numbers on your renewals, right? Now, on a macro level, is let's take some of these made up numbers over here, right? So let's say that I have, I'm going to make it easy. We over the last year did 240 enrollments, let's say. And that's an average of 20 enrollments a month. And then last year we did 120 renewals. Okay? Leadership, Black Belt Club, okay, whichever. That now means that on an average month I did 10 renewals per month. That means my renewal rate is 50%. Is that a good number or a bad number? Bad. Okay. I want my foundation to be 75%.
And 50 could be okay. I would give it a C.
Certainly better than where I'm at now.
Yeah, it's not an F.
Yeah, because
It's not
most
an F,
schools
yeah,
aren't
but-
there. But
yeah.
eventually
Yeah.
you want to be in a B or an A.
But what I want it to look like is, and it could be more, but what I want it to be is I want it to be, I average 20 enrollments a month, I average 15 renewals a month. Okay? Now, I'll give you a multi-school owner perspective. The problem I always had in multis was getting my staff to focus on enrollments in that hunter-killer mode and renewals consistently in the same month. Okay? I mean, seriously. I mean,
This is the absolute truth. They either have a great enrollment month, and then if the enrollments are down that month, all of a sudden they're focusing on renewals because both of them make a good gross.
Yeah.
It's just that when you get them both at the same month, you have a lot of enrollments and a lot of renewals the same month, you have a record month.
So, and the solution was, you hear us talking about some of these things, but it's interesting to understand the backstory.
Sound familiar?
My conclusion is I had to almost do it myself to make sure we cleaned up and didn't let them get too far behind, right? So we orchestrated intramural tournament, which for the beginners was all me And, and oftentimes it got handed off to Greg and, Frank, other staff members who were pretty good at it. But mostly it was me getting them all together for an hour renewal prep session. And then getting them together to show off the black belts and getting them excited. That was what intramural.
And they didn't know that was a prep session. They just were going to have it. Master Oliver's going to talk to them.
Yeah, it's an intramural tournament, right? But we did a prep setting, goal setting session, and then we did a show off the black belt session, right? Then we did a black belt extravaganza. The black belt extravaganza was we do the black belt testing and retreat. We don't want the students to see that because we're beating the shit out of them, right? But then afterwards, and they recovered, and the black and blue marks aren't visible, they get to perform and do a big show with music and stuff, and everybody can clap, right? And then we did, renewal blitz. So what we would do is November, December every year we'd do a renewal blitz. Why was the timing on that? Well, November, but also October, September, August tended to be peak enrollment months. Now I could do a renewal blitz in November, December and clean that up just like Colby's did, right? Then January, February, March, April tended to be big enrollment months. So in April, May, we would do another renewal blitz, right? So now I'm catching all of the spring renewals, all the fall renewals. Really, I probably should have done 3, right? But then in May, we're bringing the culmination, everybody's renewed. And in December, we're bringing the culmination, everybody's renewed. Does that make sense? Why? I wanted to have 75% of everybody enrolled renewed. And I knew across a big organization, my staff got sloppy on getting them done when they needed to. So therefore, I could pick up the slack and do it myself. Does that make sense? And when I say do it myself, I wasn't literally sitting down in 6 locations doing billing renewals. But I was orchestrating the thing that kind of forced them to. And behind the scenes incentivized them and cajoled and bitched and everything else to get them to clean it all up.
And tell them why we originally started it in December.
Well, because your idea was you take your worst month of the year and you make it your best month of the year.
That's what would ended up happening. That's how we initially started on the renewal blitz. I was seeing in our 12 schools that December was constantly our worst month of the year. So I said, well, it's hard to go out and get a lot of new people in December because they're kind of going in different directions, even though we would have buddy referrals and tried everything else. So I said, well, why don't we make it a big renewal month? So we started doing this big renewal blitz, and all of a sudden December for all 12 of our schools was a record month for everybody. And this was like 35 years ago. And so now it just kept going, and then we decided, well, why are we doing it once a year? Let's put it in the middle.
Yeah.
Because people get sidetracked on the renewals. They get so busy with the day-to-day activities and marketing and getting new enrollments that you lose track.
I got distracted, that's why I had this. Renewals tend to be, in the staff's mind, important but not urgent. Well, he came in today for class. I didn't get a chance to sit down and work with him on the prep, but he's going to be back in on Thursday. Then on Thursday, I get distracted. Well, he'll be back in next Monday. On Monday, I get, it's my story about why I could care less about retail or anything that's a distraction was literally, I'm at the front desk, Mrs. Jones is comparing a size 5-foot pad with a size 7-foot pad, wants Billy to put on the 5s, then wants Billy to put on the 7s, then wants Billy to put on the 5s, the sale is $25. I would have been better off to just give her both pairs and say, keep them both, what the hell. While my $30,000 renewal was walking out the door, right? To me, in the school, this is a tangent, there's down payments, there's paid in fulls, there's billing. I don't care about anything else. There's the primary program. I don't care about other programs. I don't give a shit about cage fit. I don't give a shit about cardio kickboxing. I don't care about any of that other stuff. Kill it all. You know, if you're doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, have 400 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu students. I mean, just focus on the primary thing. If you want to have bottled water in the school, put a cooler over there and give it away, right? If you want to do retail, I mean, we have a lot of pads and stuff. There's 1 or 2 ways to solve it. They renew and you give it to them as part of the thing, so they pay $1,000 down payment, you give them $300 worth of stuff, they feel good about it. Or you put it on the website, let them order, like Century will do the Century Direct. all of our stuff for years was, they ordered on the website, if the foot pad is the wrong size, they mail it back to Century, Century mails them the other one, I don't touch it, right? People will say to me, well, I make a lot of money on retail. No, you don't. You never make any money on retail. You carry an inventory, you have slippage, the instructor has 52 pair of foot pads in his trunk because he never has one. The dumb nuts comes in, needs another pair of pants, and he spills a Diet Coke on his sleeve. You know, you never make any money off retail. So the only time I ever made money on retail was when I did that big tournament and we sold t-shirts. Greg was the recipient of the one time that went sideways. So we decided to order these really expensive, nice sweatshirts that nobody bought, and I was out there flogging him every 15 minutes. Well, go hold it up to him. Show, let him try it on. When we get stuck with like 300 sweatshirts at the end of the day.
I think I still have about 20.
Yeah, exactly. I was getting them for
That's
Christmas
like,
presents.
what was that, 25 years ago?
It was a long time ago. I still remember that and when Becky lost the prize money, and when the fire alarm went off at 2 a.m. One of the things I will never do. He keeps trying to volunteer me to run a national tournament. I say not only when hell freezes over, but even when hell freezes over, I ain't doing it. Okay, we're still on get measured, gets done. So one way you measure your renewals is just a head count, right? I've given you two measures already. Measure number one is the ratio of leadership to Black Belt Club. I designed the thing. I designed it with the intent of that being around 50-50. Okay? I have yet to have it in any school be less than 75-25, and normally it's trending 90-10. Now, to the uninitiated, the first thing that blows their mind is the more expensive thing is what everybody chooses, right? Because what would, if you ask anybody else, we're going to let them get to black belt by paying $300 a month. We're going to let them get to black belt by paying $500 a month. What will everybody tell you? What will your wife, your mother-in-law, your best friend from high school that you go have beers with, what will everybody tell you? Well, everybody's going to choose the cheaper one. What happens? This is what happens. What does that mean? I have yet to talk anybody into charging enough for leadership, because I have yet to have anybody who priced enough people out of the market that they went to the lower price point. Everybody anchor that in for you for a second. Okay? Amanda and Steve, you saw it. I'm saying, I didn't count heads, but I'm saying it was plus 90%, right? So, I mean, that's not an exaggeration, right? If there were 40 people in class, there were no more than maybe 4 black tops. That's fair? Okay, that's 10%. That means that they're running this way. Alan had the audacity to say to me the other day, oh, well, our renewals last 6 months, it's been 100% leadership, nobody's done master play. You know what I did? For God's sake, charge more for leadership, right? So the first number I'm giving you that you want to keep track of is what's your percentage that are leadership versus black belt. And always have a fallback, because that lets you push the leadership price higher. Does that make sense? Okay? So you want to be tracking that. Is it 50-50? Is it 90-10? What's the percentage? Okay? The other is, what's my enrollment versus renewal percentage? Okay? Now, I don't particularly care about enrollment versus Black Belt Club percentage, enrollment versus leadership percentage. What I care about is what percentage of my enrollments ended up renewed. Again, the longer period of time, the more accurate that is, right? So if I had, if this month, if I only did 10 enrollments, but I did 30 renewals, that doesn't tell me how good I did with those people. What it should tell me is what were my enrollments like in December and November that I'm now renewing. Does that make sense? Okay.
Which it means it doesn't matter whether they're Black Belt Club or leadership, really, as long as you renewed them. Because if you only renew them to Black Belt Club, you can still get them to leadership later.
Yeah.
But if you don't renew them, you know you're going to lose them in 1 year.
And if you got them to Black Belt Club, you've walked them through the goal setting process properly. You got them to commit to a longer term goal. And everybody, make a note of this. None of this is about getting their signature on a contract, really. It's not, I mean, we're having them sign an agreement. But it's not about the retention improves because they made a legally binding commitment. Because really that commitment, and most people who are consumers know it too, that commitment is we're committing 100% to provide the services that we committed to, and their level of commitment to actually pay for it over that time is close to zero, right? Is what you want it to be is psychologically and emotionally, they are committed. If it's a child, mom and dad are committing to the vision they have in their head of that child as a black belt when they're in middle school or high school, right? That's what you want. That's why you're doing it. What people who misrepresent it or misthink about it is they're all about getting the contract. Well, that's not the deal. It's about the emotional commitment to be with this long term. Does that make sense?
It's what that's
Yeah.
going to mean when they
Okay,
get there.
so one number is what's the ratio from enrollments to renewals. Obviously, at every month you're keeping the number of how many renewals we have, how many of those were leadership, how many were black belt, because you want to know this percentage. If this percentage looks like this, that means leadership isn't priced high enough. So far, so good?
Sir?
And our pricing model,
But it's not unusual for the new members to have trouble in their mind visualizing more people are going to do leadership, so they end up with probably more people in black belt in the beginning.
yeah, just because their balls shrink up,
Because
don't
they
present
have
it
it.
properly. Okay, so our pricing, no, I mean, that's the reason. Right?
Ask and you shall receive.
Yes, exactly. But our pricing model is if this is what the monthly is on the enrollment, the price on the leadership is double. And the fallback is in between. Okay? And the fallback on this could be $325 a month. Or if you really wanted to make sure you're getting everybody, you could make it $297 a month. Right? See, that's not, I would prefer this to be about a 50% bump. So if it was me, if this is the enrollment price, I'm going to have $397 is the black belt and $497 is the leadership, or $347. But you could even drop it down if you felt more comfortable initially, down below in this format. You could have this be just a little bump, and this be a significant bump. They're all still going to want the expensive one, right? So you're not going to sacrifice that many of them. And by the way, we're doing all of our selling is about being a black belt and then being in the leadership program. The black belt program satisfies them being in the black belt without them being able to afford the leadership program. Does that make sense?
And a lot of the entry level, what I say entry level is new members, what they were, probably the biggest pill they could swallow was a 197, 297, 397. And then they started bumping that 197 to 247 or 227, and then the others bumping them a little bit too. So you got to find a number that you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Because if you think it's too high, you're never going to sell it.
Yeah, 90% of the price objection will be the subliminal message going on in your head while you produce it, right? Or whoever is doing the sale.
And what
So
are
you've really got to role play, put it on tape, listen to yourself, watch your body language, videotape, because you know, I always had this with staff. If I really wanted to take a significant bump, I had to find the one person who really bought into it, let them go do it without telling anybody else, then show them the results so everybody else would believe it, right? Early on, I used to be me. I found that was a problem because they thought I could do anything, but they couldn't. So I had to find, you know, whoever my top program director was who wanted to, let them run with it, and then when they had good numbers, show everybody.
What,
That makes
Lynn,
sense?
what are your price points now?
247, 297, 347.
Yeah, so you should raise leadership. If you go to 397, it'll make zero difference. If you go to 497, it might make a little difference, but you're going to make a lot more money, and it's going to work better. Okay, okay, so our last segment here on gets measured, gets done.
Yes, sir.
We have measured the enrollment flow. We have measured the dropouts. we have measured the renewals, right, relative to the enrollments. Everybody good with that? Okay. Now, well, and one more piece on the renewal before we go into more specifics. Here's the way you want to think about it. So let's say this is to getting to black belt. And this is the initial enrollment for 12 months. And this is the first 4 months, and this is the first 2 months. Okay? When you bring somebody in as an introductory student, think of the introductory program as being 2 months, not 2 lessons. Okay? So I bring them in lesson 1, lesson 2. I do a trial to evaluate them to train to black belt. I bring them in through the next 8 to 12 lessons to do a trial, evaluation, and prep to renew. I never enroll them, give them the class schedule, throw them over the wall, and go pull them out 2 months later. Doesn't work.
Did you catch that?
Okay?
So it's a constant treat them like an egg, hand carry them through. Once you get them renewed, you can't just throw them over the fence. You still have to keep them excited, teach good classes, make sure they're progressing, give them touches, good feedback, build rapport. But critical that in that, if you sign them up and then you don't talk to them about or do anything that's going to enhance their decision to make the goal to black belt in 2 months, if you're not doing it consistently, that's called prepping them, pre-framing them. If you're not doing that in those first 2 months, you won't be able to renew them in 2 months by just then approaching them 2 months later. Oh, by the way, you're ready for black belt. That doesn't happen.
And just think of a simple piece of that. The minute you enroll them, you're scheduling them for their next lesson. We had a little schedule once in. Put them in that. Let them get text and email reminders, call and confirm. Sit them down and go through the folder conference, hold their hand. Teach them about the ID card, all that stuff. Do that until they get their gold belt. Every class. Now, Ms. Jones, you're coming Tuesday, Thursday, wanted to confirm that this Thursday is going to be good for your next class? Yes. Put them in schedule once. Let them confirm that. Call and confirm it. Greet them at the door. Prep them. Yes, sir.
So you automate their first scheduled classes, and then if they don't show up, you follow up personally?
Sure.
Okay, is that your usual system for everyone?
Well, and I would call and confirm that for first two ahead of time too,
Okay.
right? So I always think of the automation as the backup to the human follow-up, not as the primary, right? But I would be all through white belt. The next appointment is always scheduled. Now you already had the conversation of you're coming Monday, Thursday. So on Monday, I'm just saying, Ms. Jones, you're going to be here with Billy Thursday. Yes. Here's something I would like you to do between now and Thursday.
So you got to get them in the habit of coming to classes. So it's always good in the very beginning to constantly reconfirm their next class. Now remember, I have you down for Thursday. That going to be good? Yeah. Okay, great. See you guys Thursday. So just a little touch base. If you do that with your new people, you'll get them on track, because it's going to be hardest in the beginning because it's a new schedule they're trying to implement. They're going to be more likely to forget it a little bit more until they develop that habit of working everything else around those 2 days. They know those 2 days are karate days. Everything else, but in the beginning they don't, well, what were my karate days? Till it becomes habit.
But I would say even more important than that, and that's important, is you want to discipline your staff or yourself. That, I have 4 intros tonight. I'm all over that, right? But I have 3 white belts coming in for their 4th class. Gets lost in the shuffle. I want to move them into the urgent category. So I want to move them into, they've got appointments, I'm greeting them at the door, I'm prepping them, I'm going over another piece of the developmental process, I'm taking their temperature, I'm working with them individually a little bit to make sure they're comfortable, right? I'm introducing them to a few more students they haven't met yet, right? I want to have, in my mindset, it's just as important as that list of appointments I have for first intros, because it's more important.
Just like Greg said, in that second school of his, when he went to the renewal process, it was so much easier to move him right into that leadership program than in that first school that he didn't take them through those steps in the first 2 months or the first 4 months. So they were never pre-framed enough. He probably even then was pre-framed, but not enough that he is now. And everybody just falls right into place. And then I'm sure even he had that feeling that, wow, I didn't realize it was that easy. Because once you do it right from the beginning, all these new people that you have coming in.
Plus, he had that time capsule, warm, fuzzy feeling about black belt.
Well, no, I mean, he's right. You know,
Yeah,
that's,
yeah.
Well, the big thing though was, you know, the staff
Yeah.
in the Fort Collins school was, you know, there's no way.
Yeah.
You know, when I brought the leadership thing up, it was no way. No white belts are going to do that. No gold belts are going to commit to 6 years, 7-year program. And you know, it was more training the staff. And so actually, what worked out really well was
Was the other guys making him look bad?
the other guys started white belts and gold belts. They had, you know, 75% of our gold belts were renewed. And
You can never underestimate the management value of being humiliated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I'm dead serious about that.
Yeah, no, and
Okay,
I
so-
actually took the staff and I traded places one
Yeah.
day, and I said, go up there and see what's going
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
And then they came back and go, okay.
Holy shit, okay. Okay, so now our next piece of measure gets done. And we're off renewals now, okay? So if you forget all of your martial arts instincts and you're a teacher and one thing or another, the purpose of you owning a business, okay? Let's make it in simple terms like this other stuff. Would it be fair to say on the highest level is to have as few headaches as possible and make as much money as possible? I mean, obviously do it in an ethical, wonderful way and have a positive contribution to the community. And you're not selling drugs and you know, you're not a pimp. But it's to make as much money as possible with as few headaches as possible, right? Now, so much of the time when we're structuring our business, we end up creating a bunch of headaches, pain in the ass, work requirements for ourselves that didn't need to be there. Because we forget, well, my mission here in my business took me a long time to figure this out, by the way. I kept overlaying shit, and I got it. Everyone who went out and opened their own school, in almost every case, they tried to replicate what they saw me doing without ever saying, would you do that again? In some cases, yes. In some cases, like, hell no. That was the dumbest thing. But Mike Erickson was one of them. I wrote a chapter in the book about him, about he went to Phoenix and tried to replicate what I did. And he never bothered asking me, right? At least with June Ree, I asked, you know. Okay, which of this stuff, in Nick too, you know, and you know, which of this stuff would you do, which of it wouldn't you do, right? But let's start with that premise. The mission is, just from a simple business standpoint, make as much money as possible with as few headaches as possible. Is that a fair thing to say?
Sir.
Okay, so when you're making decisions about how you're going to operate in the school, is this going to get me an enrollment or renewal? Is it going to improve retention? And is it going to help me, you know, justify, create a higher value, lifetime value, monthly value, whatever. And when I'm organizing my business life, is this going to help me make more money personally? See, I mean, the gross doesn't mean for shit. I mean, I've grossed $1.7 million and lost $250,000 before. That's not a good thing. And I've also grossed 800 and kept 400, which is better, right? So it's about net profit, and it's about as few headaches as possible. Does that make sense? One of the reasons that we talk about simplifying systems is there's an awful lot of things that seem like a good idea at the time that you start doing that doesn't create enrollments, renewals, or retention, and doesn't make you more money and simplify your life, right? If there's a choice between complicated and simple, go for simple, right? Mm-hmm. And if there's a choice between you don't need to do it at all or you're going to automate it, don't do it at all. Okay? There's a great article called Don't Automate, Obliterate. It was published in the Harvard Business Review. It became the book Re-Engineering the Corporation, and that was their entire example. Is people were spending a whole bunch of time creating software to do stuff that nobody was ever looking at anyway. Generating reports that nobody ever looked at for 20 years. It just became automated in the system. You know, like when I'm running a school, you know the way I file the contracts? Chronologically. What does that mean? I create a stack in the corner. Next one goes on top. Nowadays I do scan it first, so it's in the software. But just stack it in the corner. I don't need to have a file cabinet. I don't need to have it alphabetically. Mrs. Jones doesn't need a file. I don't need Mrs. Jones' test papers and all of the things they've turned in. I don't need the old ID cards. That goes in the shredder, right? When I would do, you know, in my life in running the schools, multiples, I was either the grand opening guy or the turnaround guy. When I put myself in for a turnaround, mostly what I did is I had somebody take every piece of paper in the place and put it in the dumpster. That was it. Nowadays you'd shred it because it's credit card and shit, right? But it all went in the dumpster. And then I organized my intro room the way Amanda's and Steve's were. Here's what I need for an enrollment. Here's what I need for a renewal. If it's not an enrollment or renewal, I don't want to see it. Gone. How did I organize the contracts? Alphabetically. What else did I save? Nothing. Done deal. Okay? Now, our next step of gets measured, gets done is, all we've talked about so far is the top line. Well, you can gross a lot of money and make no money. The mission is to make a lot of money, right? Anybody have a ethical, moral quandary, you know, a little devil on your shoulder or a voice going on in your head where you're sensitive to making money? If you do it ethically and honestly by providing a great service, it's Zig Ziglar's line, you can have everything you want, life and you want if you help enough other people. A lot of people miss the enough. Other people get what they want. There is nothing morally or unethical about making 100,000 a year, $1 million a year, 100 million a year or more. I had a friend who was, I don't know, he was probably making 5 million a year, and he hung around a whole bunch of people making 100 million a year. And what he said, which I always anchored into, is people think that rich people are assholes. He said that's not what it is. Money's just an amplifier. If somebody's a warm, wonderful human being, they're more warm and wonderful with more money, more zeros to their income. And if they're underlying that they're an asshole, they get worse. It's just an amplifier, right? So if you have an anchor in your mind of, I'm going to add a zero to my income and I'm going to become an asshole, if you're already an asshole, you know, I mean, have somebody explain it to you. What's that great quote? You know, I'm sorry I called you an asshole. I thought you knew, right? If you're already an asshole, it's going to make you worse. So you might want to fix that. But if you're a warm, wonderful human being that care about other human beings, there's nothing wrong with making as much money as you humanly possibly can and keeping as much of it as you can, right? So get over that. If you want a Ferrari, make enough money to buy a Ferrari. I'm into fast cars. I'm not into paying ridiculous amounts of money for them. I like to buy them a couple years used, like my 2 BMWs. My daughter said, what'd they do, give you a damn BMW punch card? Because like within a year I bought 3 BMWs, the motorcycle and the SUV and the convertible. And I said, no, actually I'm a Porsche Ferrari guy. But you know, it was, they didn't have a convertible Porsche that matched the, well anyway. But there's nothing wrong with making as much money as you can possibly make as long as you're doing it honestly and ethically, right? So if you have any hang-ups with that, get rid of it. Because it's just a multiplier. So if you're an asshole, you're going to get worse. If you're a good guy, you're going to get better. But just do it honestly, right? But the next piece of it is all we've talked about is revenue. And on get measured, gets done, you've got to be paying attention to your profit and loss statement every month, right? Mid-month, it may not make any sense, but you know what a lot of small business owners do is they manage by the balance in the checking account. Well, that doesn't, you know, I mean, it's, you know, if you're going to pay a bill, you got to have money in the checking account. But you want to be really paying attention to what your profit and loss looks like every month, every quarter, every year, right? Now, in general terms, we find that most martial artists dramatically and exorbitantly overpay for rent. Okay? Rent has 2 components. It has space to be utilized in a neighborhood, and the neighborhood demographics are important. And it has advertising components, right? So the warehouse space behind the loop shop, buried in the industrial park is therefore worth less than your between Toys R Us, the AMC theater, and the high-end grocery store, right? If I have a choice, I'd rather be next to Whole Foods, the grocery store, you know, Chuck E. Cheese, and the movie theater, right? But you've got to weigh the advertising value of the profile versus the square footage value of the neighborhood and make a realistic decision. You've done some very high profile spaces, very expensive relative. It's been very worthwhile. Now, a couple of those shopping centers, I'd have a hard time replicating it, right? And you know that. I mean, the second location, I haven't come across a landlord yet that wanted to help everybody make money out of that way. You know, mostly they want to make sure the check shows up and then everybody leaves them alone, right? But in his case, next door to the Super Target and in the shopping center with the Regal Cinema and did the Whole Foods ever open?
Yes.
Okay, the Whole Foods, that's paid off really well. But you've got to make a conscious decision. How much of it is advertising? How much of it is the square footage in the right neighborhood? Okay? It's very hard to overcome you're in the wrong neighborhood, right? If you're surrounded by Section 8 housing, you know, no amount of doing everything else right fixes that. You want to be in the, you know, that's one thing I did smart. My next door neighbor growing up did all of the demographic planning for City Service Oil Company. So he did demographic research that back then probably would have been $1 million for me for free because he was the next door neighbor. Nowadays you can do it online. Nowadays you can pull up census.gov and look at, you know, census tract data, everything else. Back then it took a lot of effort. But so once you have this revenue number, which remember is really only made up by down payments, monthly payments, paid in fulls, right? Sure, there's some seminars, there's tests and stuff like that. I don't care about any of that stuff. I really just care about how much do they pay down, how much are they paying monthly, and did I get some big paid in fulls, maybe some deferreds, right? You know what I mean by deferred? Contracts, $30,000, they pay $7,500 a month for 4 months. I like that too, right? Or what you and I were just talking about. It's a 3-year agreement, they pay it over 18 months. Well, that's a monthly payment, but it's an artificially inflated monthly payment, right? Or it's a 12-month agreement, they pay over 4 or 5, right? 6. So, you know what I'm talking about, an accelerated payment? But the top line is only relevant to what the expenses are, right? Most martial artists, as I was saying, overpay for rent. What we'd like to see that be is 12 to 15% of the gross. Understand that that's relative to the advertising value, right? Now, your rent as a percentage of gross is fine now, right? Because he's grossing what, 80, 100,000, what's the average month of 2 locations?
Of the two?
Yeah, Fort Collins.
Fort Collins is about 90 and...
Okay, what's the rent?
12.
Okay, so 12%, or actually it's about 15, but very good advertising value of that location, by the way. And what's the other one?
We're doing about 60.
And what's the rent?
14.
A little high, right?
But
So,
it's,
and you know
it's been open 18 months,
24.
2 years now.
Yeah. So he's got to get that to 100, right? But you did everybody follow what we're saying here so far, right? So rent, we want to keep it ideally 12 to 15% of the gross. If it goes over that, it better be like one of those locations that he has. That's, you know, I mean, you're literally between the Whole Foods and the Regal Theater, in front of the playground with high volume restaurants, everything else at that location. Okay. The next thing that we find is, and this is important, it's a little subtle. Martial artists tend to underpay really good people and have too much head count that they're paying it all. Okay? So you've got to be careful about, you keep adding part-timers to the payroll, because usually they don't add very much, and if you're doing a good leadership program, a lot of those would have been volunteers to begin with. My rule of thumb was always, I've got a high school or college kid, and it's a choice of they go flip burgers, or I pay them hourly. I'll pay them hourly because I don't want to lose them to flipping burgers or something, right? However, if it's a 45-year-old engineer who's making $150 a year, they'll spend more time and be more effective as a volunteer than they ever would if I tried to pay them something. Does that make sense? So the number 2 thing on payroll is if you've got a good full-timer, they've got to be anchored in as a percentage. They've got to be making an income that's comparable to or better than their other alternatives. Because we know what happens in a martial arts school. Wife, sister, brother, mom, dad are all saying what? When are you going to go get a real job? None of them are saying, oh wow, great, you're an entrepreneur, you're a great business owner, this is fantastic, I'm so happy for you. They say, when are you going to grow up and stop playing karate and get a real job? My first instructor said that to me. I tried to show him the business plan. Ran. He owned a janitorial supply. You know what the words of encouragement was? Yeah, you can play karate for a couple of years and get a real job. The funny part was, 3 years later, he was a Beamer guy. He rode his BMW from Tulsa out here, and so by then I was living in a 5,000, square foot house, driving the Mercedes with the Corvette, one thing or another. And his family janitorial business, I was both grossing and netting more than his business. And I showed him the numbers. He got pneumonia on the way back riding the bike in the rain. Every now and then you've got to take small pleasures, right? So, on payroll, what the percentage should be depends upon whether you're Greg, myself, Master Smith, owning and operating multiple locations, or whether you're in there and you're part of the staff, right? So I was always targeting 25% of the individual location gross relative to payroll. Up to 300 active, that was divided out as 12% for the branch manager, 10% for the other full-timer. That meant I had 3% left for all the part-time and everything else, right? Okay. Once I went over 300, it stayed around 25%. It had tendency. The bigger you get, ironically, the harder it is to keep the profitability high. But I ended up going to 10%, 7%, 7%. Right there, we're at 24%, and usually ended up with about the same 3% in part-timers. But that was like 300, 350, 400, 500 people. Does that make sense? Now, if I'm an owner-operator location, you can't have 25% in payroll plus be paying yourself a salary and have the numbers work out, right? So my rule of thumb would be, 20% or less payroll plus yourself. And I want you to be on a salary of at least 12% is just a standard salary. Plus, of course, you're keeping whatever's left over. Does that make sense? One mistake that people make as an owner is they don't just put themselves on a salary and pay themselves. That's a mistake. Okay? If you decide, let's pick a number. The school does $500,000, 12% is $60,000. Put yourself in payroll, run a check, run it through payroll. You get cut your check for $5,000. That's your base every month. If you have trouble cutting, running payroll and making the bills, that's number one. It's a good, sharp pin up your ass to fix that, right? But you just get used to you're on a base, that's your base salary, and then as you get the profitability up, you get all of that as well, right? So far, so good. So again, remember the mistake is somebody's really good and they're taking a 30% pay cut relative to their other opportunities. They have no support mechanisms around there. I guarantee you in 95% of the case, nobody's high-fiving them because they're a martial arts instructor. Everybody in their extended family is saying, when are you going to stop playing karate and get a real job? And if they're making less money than they could in their real job, it further burns and aggravates. In my case, it was usually the guy who's a hot shot and he just got a new girlfriend or he's getting married, and they're whispering in his ear. And the ones who are making a lot of money, what they were getting whispered in their ear is, "You're making that asshole rich. Why don't you go do it on your own?" Right? If I can't count the number of people who are making me rich who, in fact, aren't rich now over the years, right? But you want them to be making more money than they could make across the street at the bank or across the street at whatever else it was. So at least they're showing them the paycheck saying, well, you know, I looked. You know, if I had gone and done that, here's what I'd be making. I'm making more than that. And by the way, it's a lot more fun, right? So the other mistake is just letting the head count get too big and all of a sudden the payroll inflates itself. And by the way, big schools are bad about this. I was looking at Tim and Dave Kovar's main location one time, the payroll percentage was 52%. Well, so what? Your gross is high. You're not making any money, right? So the third thing is your marketing budget. Keep in mind there's interplay between the rent and the marketing budget. But the third thing that we find is, well, one is people overpay for rent. Two is they let the head count inflate. Their payroll percentage gets out of line. Three is they underspend on marketing. Okay? The way you anchor yourself in to not be so sensitive to the huge amount of money that goes out the door marketing is to remember lifetime value of the student. We want that to be $7,000 or $8,000. Number two, they're paying $500 or $600 a day they enroll. My ideal as a marketing coach for you guys is to get everybody to charge $500 or $600 when they enroll and get your cost per enrollment to be that or less. Sometimes that's difficult, okay? But if you're doing that, that down payment liquidates your cost of advertising, everything else is gross profit. It's a wonderful place to be. Does that make sense? And then what happens is, think about conversations that we hear on the side all the time. Well, I did this Valpak ad, it didn't work. Okay, what happened? We only got 2 calls and 1 enrollment. Well, if the Valpak ad was $380 and I got 1 enrollment and they paid $500 down, you made $120 there, they're worth $6,000 or $7,000. That's almost a 20-to-1 return. What the hell are you bitching about? But the way we think about it in our gut is, oh, 10,000 of those suckers went out, only 2 people called me. And the other one was really flaky, only 1 enrolled. Well, shit, I do that all day long. My question is could I ramp it up, right? So, and there, by the way, nowhere you turn, there's no free lunch. There's no free lunch online, there's no free lunch at Facebook. You know, he and I will talk to new people coming in, and guess what they say? What are you doing to market? Well, I try to post on Facebook, and I post on Instagram, and I've got a real nice website, and it shows up pretty good. And we give our students guest passes. Do you know what I hear? Nothing, nothing, a little bit, nothing, right? I say, you could have just said nothing, and it would have been fine. You didn't have to go through the list of things that are nothing to try to justify that you're doing something, right? Oh, and I email people. Okay. Great, right? So, the next piece is getting really good at looking at a profit loss statement every month. Now, whether you hire an outside accountant to do it, or you use QuickBooks Online, I mean, this is one of those things that is so generic for businesses. There's tons of different ways to do it. But I mean, QuickBooks is the 800-pound gorilla from a software standpoint. You should have. I require our schools to have an outside accounting firm, mostly because I want the accounting firm to make sure they never screw up payroll, and I want them to force feed a P&L to them every month, even if they don't look at it. Does that make sense? But so all a P&L is revenue. And I see a lot of little bitty schools that, you know, well, we did X amount in selling this thing, and we did X amount in seminars, and, you know, again, tuition. What's your tuition? Down payments paid in full is one thing or another. Total revenue, that's your gross revenue. And then you're going to itemize all the expenses, but really there's only 3 big categories, and there's miscellaneous surrounding there, right? Is category 1 is rent, category 2 is payroll, category 3 is advertising, Category 4 is all the miscellaneous shit that's really business related. And really for most of us, Category 5 is all the personal shit that you're burying into the P&L that you can get away with. Totally appropriate. The franchising industry calls all of this stuff discretionary income. Whether you bury it in there because the IRS will let you write off the Porsche, or you pay for it directly, or you justify that you went on the trip for some reason or whatever it is, doesn't matter. Just keep that as a separate little category in your mind, right? Anything that you're burying in for tax purposes, fine. As long as it's legal, as much as you can. But really, miscellaneous is phone, software, computer expense, your liability insurance. Travis is probably paying double or triple what he needed to for liability insurance.
Yeah.
Not that that's a big category, but we send him to K&K because that's usually where I've been finding. Who are you using?
Should be about 200 to 3 at the most, depending on how many students. But he was paying
Pinnacle.
1,000.
Well, that's Pinnacle is
On his insurance.
workman's comp.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. But anyway, so miscellaneous is phone, utilities, one thing or another.
And just like this trip, guys, you should have your receipts for everything. If you
Yeah, that's
took
100% right.
If you rented a car, if your hotel, your food while you're here, all of that is all tax deductible
Yeah.
for you and all of your staff that are here.
Yeah,
You know,
well, we're not
everything
getting
you
tax
spend.
advice, but
Yeah.
whatever. But anyway, but mostly what you know is this doesn't add up to a lot, right? And most people are paying for their cell phone and everything else. But
Utilities,
really,
you got utilities
Yeah.
in their phone.
and by the way, if you build your dream school, you go from 2,500 square feet, you build your 20,000 square foot dream school because you always wanted it, and it's got marble walls and so forth. Don't be surprised when the first utility bill you get is for $4,000, and you need to replace the carpet, and that's $50,000. I've told I don't know how many people don't build your dream damn freaking school. Put it in your house. If you want marble floors, make that your entryway at your house, and make the school as nice as it needs to be for enrollments, retention, renewals. Everything else is just, ego, right? Now, if that's the way you want to spend the money, fine. I remember Tom Callis one time. He built this oak cabinet for the cards and everything. It was back before he decided being broke was honorable. He built this oak. He spent like $30,000 on an oak cabinet for the school. I'm like, well, it's going to be scratched tomorrow, and it's going to be beat up within 2 years. Then you're going to have to replace it. Why the hell is he spending like $30,000 on a stupid, you cut into the drywall, put it in, finish it off nice, $50, right? But you want to make sure and I can't tell you how many people we talk to. We say, well, what did you gross last month? What was your end? They don't know, right? But you've got to be paying attention to rent, payroll, marketing budget, and miscellaneous. But most of this stuff, I see a lot of people who try nickel and dime. Well, Asian World has a special this month, and I can get our belts for $1.49, where normally we're paying $1.99 through Century, so I'm going to order the. That's all stupid shit, right? You spend 2 hours saving $50. It's all stupid shit, right? Get somebody that you're used to using. You're fine. No big price shopping, everything all the time. I mean, it's just dumb, right? Doesn't mean overspend, but the amount of your time that you spend trying to cut something by $50 this month is far outweighed by spending the same time of how do I get another renewal.